What if I told you that one of America's wealthiest institutions isn't a tech giant, isn't a hedge fund, and isn't a multinational corporation? It's a church. A church with a financial portfolio so vast that insiders say even Fortune 500 CEOs study its playbook. A church with real estate holdings that stretch across cities, suburbs, farmland, and entire blocks of downtown America. A church so financially disciplined that its investment arm reportedly grew from nothing to tens of billions of dollars in just a few decades, quietly, methodically, and with almost no public attention. But here's the real mystery. How did a small 19th century frontier faith born in hardship, poverty, and persecution build one of the most powerful financial machines in American history? Tonight, we're not talking theology, we're not discussing beliefs, we're following the money trail and uncovering the surprising economic strategies behind the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, better known as the Mormon Church. Because to understand this empire, you must understand the moments that shaped it, its origins, its near collapse, its turning points, and its rise into a modern financial powerhouse. This is the untold rise of America's wealthiest faith. The story begins in the early 1800s, a time before skyscrapers, before the stock market boom, before corporate America existed. Joseph Smith founded the Mormon movement in a world marked by instability. Banks failed regularly. Inflation wiped out entire towns. Wealth came and went in waves of chaos. But here's the twist. From the very beginning, the early church learned a lesson most American institutions ignored. If you want survival, you need resources, land, and economic unity. Unlike most religious movements at the time, the early Mormon community wasn't just a spiritual project, it functioned like a cooperative society. Members pooled resources, they built towns together, they survived as a collective. Think of it as an early version of an economic ecosystem. But history wasn't kind. Mormons were forced westward, first to Ohio, then to Missouri, then to Illinois, and finally toward the frontier of what would become Utah. Each relocation carried one message. Self-reliance wasn't optional, it was survival. That mindset would later become the backbone of the church's economic empire. But the true turning point was still years away. When the Mormon pioneers reached the Salt Lake Valley in 1847, they found nothing. No infrastructure, no crops, no industry, but also no competition. The result? An economic blank slate. Church leaders established a system based on 3 pillars. Pillar 1. Central planning. Communities were designed intentionally: where to build farms, where to place mills, how to organize labor. Pillar 2. Unified contribution. Members tithed to support the community. Tithing wasn't just spiritual, it became an engine of economic stability. Pillar 3. Long-term asset mindset. Instead of spending resources quickly, the church stored grain, materials, and later, money. This laid the groundwork for a habit that still defines the church today: accumulate assets quietly, deploy them strategically. Think generationally, not quarterly. But then came the next leap, the moment the church recognized that spiritual growth and financial infrastructure could be built side by side. Across the 19th century, the church helped develop irrigation systems, railroads, schools, stores, farmlands. Not all succeeded. Some collapsed, some faced legal battles, some drained resources. But the principle remained: own productive assets, avoid debt, save relentlessly. Still, none of this explains how the church transformed from a frontier community into a modern financial giant. For that, we fast forward to the 20th century. The early 1900s weren't kind financially. The Great Depression hit the church hard. Debt accumulated. Properties were at risk. Something had to change. The turning point: 1950s financial restructuring. In the mid-20th century, church leadership implemented a structural financial overhaul that would fundamentally reshape its future. Here's the cause and effect sequence. 1. The church prioritized paying off debt. Gives this restored financial stability. 2. Once debt was cleared, tithing funds expanded. Gives predictable revenue, enabled long-term planning. 3. Financial professionals were hired. Gives money wasn't just collected, it was managed. 4. Investment arms were built. Gives not to chase fast gains, but to grow gradually and conservatively. This shift transformed the church's financial culture. Instead of focusing solely on survival, leaders began building reserves, large reserves, meant for future generations. In the late 20th century, those reserves increasingly went into stocks, bonds, real estate, land development, commercial properties. This wasn't an accident. It was strategy, a strategy built on 3 principles. 1. Stability above risk. Invest conservatively, diversify deeply, avoid speculation. 2. long-term growth over short-term excitement, a mindset closer to sovereign wealth funds and individual investors. 3. Silence and prudence. Let actions speak louder than announcements. This approach worked extraordinarily well, especially in the booming markets of the 1980s, 1990s, and 2000s. The result, by the early 21st century, the church had built one of the most robust, disciplined portfolios in America. But no story of wealth rises smoothly, because at the height of stability came the breaking point. For decades, the church's financial operations existed mostly out of the spotlight, but the larger an institution becomes, the harder it is to stay invisible. Beginning in the 2010s, public scrutiny around the church's financial reserves increased. Media outlets, researchers, and former insiders attempted to estimate the church's total assets, often citing very large numbers, which sparked debate. The church, consistent with its tradition, maintained a low profile regarding its investments. It emphasized responsibility, self-reliance, and preparation for future needs. But the public wanted numbers. Numbers create narratives. Narratives create attention, and attention brings pressure. Suddenly, the quiet financial empire found itself in the public conversation, sometimes praised for its discipline, sometimes questioned for its secrecy. Pattern 1. Institutions with long-term time horizons always outperform individuals. While most investors think in months or weeks, wealthy institutions think in decades. The church does this. So do sovereign wealth funds. So do elite universities with multi-billion-dollar endowments. Time is the ultimate unfair advantage. Pattern 2. Quiet accumulation beats loud speculation. Americans admire flashy success stories, but real empires grow in silence. The most successful investors in history, corporations, foundations, and yes, churches, acquire assets quietly, patiently, and without hype. Pattern 3. Diversification protects power. Look at modern America. Tech wealth can crash, crypto can crash, housing can crash, retail can collapse. But institutions with broad, diverse, conservative portfolios survive everything. This is why Yale, Harvard, and major foundations grew so massive, and it's why the Mormon Church built such strength. Pattern 4. Discipline compounds faster than genius. Most Americans struggle with saving. Most institutions struggle with waste. But organizations that enforce strict financial discipline year after year, generation after generation, build reserves larger than anyone expects. We see this with long-lasting family businesses, large non-profits, foundations, pension funds. And the Mormon Church is a striking example of that principle applied consistently. If the Mormon financial strategy is so effective, why don't other institutions copy it? Many have tried. Most fail. Here's why. Reason 1. Discipline requires unity. Few organizations can maintain consistent financial behavior over 50, 80, or 100 years. Reason 2. Short-term pressures destroy long-term wealth. Governments face elections, corporations face shareholders, people face personal emergencies. But the church, it can operate without those pressures. Reason 3. Generational planning is rare. The rise of the Mormon economic empire isn't an accident. It's the result of nearly 200 years of decisions, some forced by history, some shaped by belief, some driven by strategy. And while people debate the numbers, the influence is undeniable. This isn't just a story about a church. It's a story about how power is built quietly, and how wealth grows where few are looking. So what can we learn from the rise of America's wealthiest faith? Takeaway number 1. Long-term discipline beats short-term ambition. Generational planning